this is something that every L2 should adopt and just like do their broad listening. Start with their broad listening.
DeepGov is a friendly fork of deep funding. So we do broad listening.
You will enjoy doing it. I think, it's so fun to really, just like vote and sort of know more about the whole thing.
Are we like regenerators? Are we communists? Or are we supporters of open source capitalism?
Definitely support us. It's just the beginning, and I think the biggest win for us would be getting a lot of data.
Welcome to Ecosystem Project Demo, the podcast where we spotlight public good projects shaping the Ethereum ecosystem. This is episode 20, brought to you by ECH Institute, and I'm your host, Pooja Ranjan. Today, we are diving into a bold and imaginative experiment at the intersection of AI, governance, and community values. DeepGov, a project proposing configurable AI politicians that assist in funding decisions while keeping human at the steering wheel. Joining us today are the creators of DeepGov, David Dao and Sejal. Welcome and thank you both for being here.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you for having us.
This is the second time Sejal is here in a month. Thank you so much, Sejal, for taking out time. I know this may be an extension of deep funding that we have done in the past. So I'm so looking forward to learn more about this DeepGov project. But before we deep dive into the project, it would be interesting for our audience to learn more about you all, like how you find Ethereum, what are you most excited about in 2025, and something like that. So maybe we can kick off with a brief introduction.
Okay, I can start. Once again, thanks, Pooja, for having me once again. Hi, everyone. I'm Sejal. I'm currently working with Allo Capital, which is a spin out of Gitcoin. And I think when I started in this space, my core interest was always like wanting to do something in public goods funding space, right? So I started with sort of being a reviewer, right, running grants program, and then sort of designing the rounds, right? And then I understood the importance of having different approaches on how you allocate capital. That's where I got interested in like exploring the design space of capital allocation mechanisms, and that's how I landed in Gitcoin and now Allo Capital, where I'm exploring this design space. And the more every day I sort of understand like what are the different problems that our space faces, and what can I do as my contribution to this space. And all these projects that we talk about, and the one that we're going to talk about today, is sort of like part of that as a contribution to solving some of the challenges that our space sees today. So yeah, that's me, and thanks for having me.
Hi everyone, I'm David Dao. So that's actually my real last name. This is such a funny question that I never thought I would ever live through my life, that my last name is questionable. But I guess, yeah, my mom has been an Ethereum fan before Ethereum was cool. So I'm AI researcher. So I've been working on AI for nature conservation and monitoring, and that resulted in a decentralized science nonprofit called Gainforce.earth. So that's a small thing that I'm leading together with a wonderful team. And we are funding and helping monitor the impact of conservation projects around the world, 35 of them right now. And when we wanted to transfer funds to them, we realized that it's really difficult to transfer funds from developed countries to developing countries. And that's where we discovered Ethereum and the blockchain and fell in love with it. And this is a core essential part of not only now transferring funds, so funding allocation, but also how we register impact and how the communities are reporting back to us what they are doing. And that's how I also got a little bit into the messy world of capital allocation in Web3 and impact evaluation. Much of the funding that Gainforce raises comes from the public goods funding field of Web3. And so we fell in love, but we also saw the pitfalls of potentially right now capital allocation Web3 and much of the grants money not going into the right places where it should go, and us being one of the receivers and of course one of the people who care about developing countries, communities, we care very much that the funding goes to the right places. So that inspired me to go back to my origins as an AI researcher and think, how can maybe emerging technologies support not just the communities in the Amazon and the rainforest, but also the digital communities like the Ethereum ecosystem itself? And that's how we came up with DeepGov.
Very interesting background and a noble cause. I'm so looking forward to learn more about this project. I understand we have got a presentation here today. So without further ado, let's get in.
So, welcome to Deep Governance, participatory mechanism design with configurable AI politicians. That's a lot. And we will unfold like what this really means. So, this is very interesting. This starts with story of Takahiro Anno. And I just want to say, like, David, please feel free to add wherever you feel like, we should expand on. But Takahiro Anno is a citizen in Tokyo. And, for the first time, he ran for the governor to be the governor of the city, right? And as you know, in anywhere, when you want to be a politician and coming from a background where you do not have any legacy or you do not have any like proper background where you have been in political system, it's very hard, right? But he did not win, but I think he was one of the candidates who had most number of votes. Being an ordinary citizen, never being, run for elections, like he managed to do that. So the question is, how did that happen, right? And the reason that it happened was because he leveraged technology, right? And he did something called broad listening, which we're gonna dive deeper into next. So before we sort of double click on broad listening, I just like want to give an overview, which we all know different forms of sort of like listening. One is broadcasting, which is very clear from the image also, like it's one to many, right? And then information explosion, which probably you see on Twitter. Like you cannot really make sense of what people want, right? How do you identify what is that people value or what is that they care about or the concerns, whatever it is, right? In the current form of sort of conversations. And then comes broad listening. I think this is the thing where, the idea is how you can leverage technology, right? Especially LLMs, where you can sort of use that to understand and make sense of what people want and what is that they care about, right? Because given it's so complex and there's going to be a lot of diversity, right? So how do you make sense of it and how do you sort of, then design your policies or then design your sort of decisions and what is that you want to implement based on those things that people care about, right? So that is broad listening. I just want to add that broad listening is a concept that was pioneered by Audrey Tang, who is Taiwan's first digital minister. I love Audrey. We all love Audrey. Audrey is, she's the best. But yeah, so she pioneered broad listening. And that's what, this person used when he ran for the governor. And we'll talk about how did he use that. So there are 3 steps in which he sort of did broad listening. So broad listening, the first thing that he did was like, I think he downloaded all the YouTube videos of, Japan, and he sort of like went through all the data where he could see like what are people talking about, what is that they want, right? So he did all of that. And then the second thing that he did was he created a political manifesto on GitHub, which actually people can also edit, right? Which sort of like talks about the things that he wanted to change or the things that, he sort of gathered through all the data that he had scraped through the videos and, the forums. And then the third thing that he did was he created a political campaign he created an AI avatar, right? Which was like the governor, which sort of talked to people and explained like why, which policy and why, right? And people could sort of like vote on that, right? And that's how he managed to sort of gather, I think, one of the highest number of votes in Tokyo elections, right? And so that is, the reason we sort of went through this story, and I think David always talks about this story, is because this is really sort of the origin of our idea for DeepGov, right? Like, imagine if you run broad listening and if you create these manifestos and if you create not just one AI, but like multiple AIs where people can vote on, which represent communities' values and then use those to sort of make decisions, right? The first experiment, which now David will dive deeper into, is what we are doing with GG23, right? Like what else better than other than public goods funding to test this out, right? Where we can actually know what is that people want to see getting funded, right? What do they care about, and how we can sort of use that to train models and get people to select those models and decide the allocation, right? So it is based on that principle. And yeah, I just wanna hand it over to David to take us through what the experiment is and what are we doing, and a little bit more about the concept.
Definitely. Thank you so much, Sejal. So just to tell you about Takahiro Anno, first of all, Japanese politicians don't have long hair. This is a no-go in Japan. And he ran for the first time as a newbie and got in the history the most votes for a newcomer for governor. And his way of doing politics was voted the best way to doing politics in all of the competitors. And now even established politicians in Japan want to copy the way he's doing politics. So he really disrupted Japanese politics with broad listening. And we want to do the similar thing for capital allocation. In many ways, DeepGov we call it always a friendly fork of deep funding because Sejal Devansh have started together with Vitalik deep funding. That is the AI as the engine, humans as the steering wheel. And you can read all about this in Vitalik's very inspiring blog post, where he argues that it's really important that not just one AI rules it all, because that would be dangerous. But in the spirit of decentralization, we need to have many AIs that are going to help us decide, potentially distill human judgment, right? And in deep funding, the way humans steer is through pairwise voting of GitHub repositories directly. And then the AIs have a Kaggle competition to predict what is the best, most similar judgment, right? But we feel maybe we can look at it a little bit more from the broad listening perspective and see if we can steer it differently. And the way we did it is, okay, DeepGov is a friendly fork of deep funding. So we do broad listening. And one of the ways to do it is, for example, to create a pulse poll. And that's something we did for the GitHub community. We asked the community simply, what are the values feel strongly about when you donate to projects, right? Simple question. We seeded it with 10 statements. Now we have 21 statements coming from the community. And you can not believe how this simple question creates opinion groups. And in fact, we collected more than 60 answers over the last 2 weeks. And those 60 answers ended up in 3 opinion groups. And really interesting, those 3 opinion groups is then what we use to seed potential, we call it constitutions, or Audrey calls it model specs of large language models. So in comparison to deep funding, where any model can go, DeepGov is a small subset of models. Specifically, we use large language models plus like a constitution that tells the language model what are the values it should care about. And this constitution is derived from broad listening, derived from the 3 opinion groups. And we resulted in 3 very funny personalities. Panda, the regenerator, which is region inspired. Luna, the open source capitalist, who is very much about numbers, impact, max utility. And we have Grant, the Gitcoin communist, who cares about community voting. And so these politicians, we call them politicians because in many ways we want them to be voted on, right? And we want them to give power and influence over how, for example, these fundings are distributed. These politicians now are able to read through all of Gitcoin applications, leverage tons of data from Karma Gap, from the application itself, from hypercerts, and then it puts it all into the large language model with the value set and give you back a review. And why is that super cool? Because, well, it's a very transparent model spec on GitHub. So if you feel like your application is not well represented, if you feel the reviews are really stupid, if you want to contribute more ideas on how to improve it, but you lack the coding skills to like create a new machine learning model, no problem, we got you. Because all you need to do is just go to GitHub and change a sentence here. So you can create a pull request, or you can comment on GitHub. You can say, hey, I don't think this is correct. Or if you're really not happy at all about this model, you can run for office yourself. That's how we call it. You can just fork the whole GitHub repository and create your own AI configurable politician. And so why did we do this? And that's because when we talked with Audrey about deep funding, she asked a really amazing question, which is, what about feedback? How can, right, like we humans steer the machine, but how do we know, for example, in a car, when you steer too much or you steer too less, right? So it's important to have feedback, and that feedback is something that is really powerful when everything is transparent, when everything is human readable, when everything is interpretable, and when, in fact, I will show you later, when you can actually talk to these agents, right, and observe their values very clearly. So we built voting assistance tooling because very simply, it's like a normal election. In a normal election, you also need to get to know the candidates first, right? So we developed everything that a normal election also has, voting assistance tooling, where you can like ask and answer some questions. And then of course we have the vote itself. So no more further ado, let me just show you what we got so far. So when you go today to vote.deepgov.org, you can simply just cast your votes here. You log in with your wallet address. We give you 100 credits by default. Then you get, depending on how active you were in protocol and how much you donated in the past, you get some extra credits based on GMV. And of course, to prevent Sybil attacks, you need to have a passport score higher than 15, right? So in case the passport is 0, we had this issue. This is not on us. Just go to app.passport.xyz and refresh your stamps and it should work. So how we do voting is quadratic voting. So you have these 100 credits that you can spend, 100 plus your extra credits. And then, for example, I thought I was a Panda fan, but I'm actually a Luna fan. So, and I'll show you later why. And so you can just give the votes that you want to Luna, and maybe I'm not able to add another 12 vote. So I have some extra credits here because it's quadratic voting. The first votes are like free, so like smaller, then I can just distribute it according to my preference, right? And then you can just vote it here. And so the problem is, but how do I know like what these agents stand for? Well, you can first look at the agent config. And this is here. This is the regenerators config. It's an open GitHub repository. You can check out his style. Where does the style from? The Panda. You can even change its core value sets. Every agent has 20 values that we derive from broad listening, implementation philosophy, impact approach, environmental sustainability principles. And so if you don't like it, just submit a pull request and change it. And if you're really confused about everything, don't worry, we got you. We have a voting assistance tool, Compass, which is super cool. It's using the broad listening questions that we derive from the community, so you can answer it yourself. So for example, do I prefer that projects with measurable outcomes should be favored over those with difficult to quantify benefits? I think so, yeah, I do agree. Or do I prefer strong community governance? Definitely yes. And then you can answer these questions, right, according to your preferences. And you can discover yourself. You can even double weight some of them. This one is really important to me. This one is also important. And it will calculate a preference of who you should vote. So here I'm pretty average, but you can see how my preferences overlay with each of the politicians' preferences. And here you can discover them in a way. But not only that, if you're really confused about this, we got you as well. You can actually talk to the politicians. So here's Luna, and you can just, it's connected straight to the Constitution MD Markdown file. And it's an LLM that basically every time the Constitution changes, reloads it. And then you can ask questions like, why should I vote for you instead of Panda, right? And then let's give Luna a trial. Let's ask her what she thinks, what she believes in. And here, this way, you can kind of keep touch, talk to the agent, explore. This is the feedback that we're talking about. And lastly, and most importantly, the data layer, right? So this is not a fun voting. Actually, $25,000 of open source matching funds depend on the results of this vote right now. Panda is right now leading. If you disagree, please vote if you have donated to Gitcoin. But you can see in our review section that these agents do a lot of work in the background. We have an intensive data layer that, for example, you can look at, for example, Gainforest. This is the project that I'm leading. You can see, for example, all of the reviews from the Gitcoin agents right now. So for example, Gitcoin Communist, in his own personal style, talks about Gainforest with the strengths, weaknesses, and recommendations. If you want to see how open source capitalist thinks about it, you can do it as well, and the regenerator as well, right? And these reviews will be added with an estimated donation support of these agents. So you can see roughly how much they highly support it or not. And so you can really see the direct impact of your simple constitution to potentially 25,000 US dollars of matching funds. So yeah, this is it. So if you want to participate in this experiment, I think it's quite an exciting time. Please vote. Donations and voting is open for 1 more week. And so we are super excited to see how this goes.
Awesome. Very cool presentation. I was listening to the presentation and I was just getting fascinated. And the story was also very cool. The backstory. Origin started from Japan and the concept taken from there, and we are building on top of that. I love the process of evolution of politicians with the blockchain background, blockchain ecosystem, and the ways to show our preferences. And we can actually talk to the politicians. That's not a feature that we can find easily in the real life. So it was really nice. And having assistance to guide for users who want to be a participant in there, like why or why not they should vote, was nice touch there. I hope this is used and tested, and the politicians are being voted, and this experiment get to its result that we are hoping to get here.
Yeah, I think the most important thing would be I would love to encourage anyone who watches this to engage with the experiment. And like David shared, you can go to compass.deepgov.org and take the questions and see who you align with, and then, vote. You will know it and you will enjoy doing it. I think, it's so fun to really, just like vote and sort of know more about the whole thing. Yeah, so would highly encourage anyone who's watching this to please. We'll also share the links probably, which will be in the show notes.
Very well. That brings us to our next segment called question and answer segment. I understand here for this project, this experiment, we have used AI agents as politicians. That's kind of very powerful metaphor. We would love to understand a little bit more about AI's accountability here. That is a concern when we think about automated system like this. Automation does not provide us enough transparency. How does deep governance ensure pluralism, transparency, and legitimacy in decision making?
This is such a great question. Maybe I can start and then Sejal, when you want to add on it. I think, and it's so sad, in many ways, these politicians are more transparent than our real politicians. Because in many ways, you see exactly how they are configured, right? So it's clear, the values are clear. It's clear what base model they're using. You can actually rerun every prediction you want by simply forking the model, and you can see and trace every edit of the constitution of the model spec simply by looking at GitHub and the commit history. So we can see who commits, who creates, who accepts. And that's where I think the accountability layer comes in. In many ways, AI will go wrong. It's not an if, it's an when. It will suddenly distribute enormous amounts of funds into a really bad project, for example, and maybe something went wrong on the config file. And having the ability to look back who committed this sentence, for example, secretly someone sneaked in that all the money should be distributed to this address, right? And it was approved by 2 owners of the repository. Then you have the accountability. You can say, hey, guys, this is not okay. Also, another way to keep things accountable is elections. I mean, the reason we like this kind of metaphor, it breaks down a really complicated steering process into something that we all know about, democracy. So how do you hold a politician accountable? You can either just not vote for them next election, right? And we keep the elections like quickly, like maybe every Gitcoin grants round, which is very fast. You can just see, okay, like no more voting for them because they lost our trust. Or what I really like about this mechanism, again, you can run for office yourself. If you see things are not going well, and if you feel injustice is happening, like in the real world, please go get engaged, right? Like, and the way to do this in the Ethereum world now with DeepGov is to fork the repository and just say that you want to run for office. And then we will integrate you into the whole compass, into the whole system, and you can get voted as well. So it's really that of a system. It's an inspiration from, we believe, how democracy can embrace technology. It doesn't have to be one against the other. It can be both, what Audrey often says, like a plurality, a digital democracy, where technology can empower human flourishment and future. We see that as well. We see this as a huge opportunity to rethink governance, the Ethereum style, I would say, and also inspire not just in Web3, but inspire outside of Web3, that this is governance that we could learn from.
Very interesting and very insightful. I understand the difference here is like when we get into real world, the politician may act differently, but when they are AI agent, they may be working mostly on the data which are being fed to them, which are made available to them. We do have much higher chances of having transparency over there. Very well. My next question is around the utility of this mechanism. It has been mentioned that this is open source, people can fork and they can obviously reuse. So you definitely envision these models being forked and reused. What type of project you think will make use of this mechanism?
Very interesting. I think one of the things that we've already been discussing, like Vitalik says in his blog, right? Every L2 has its own culture, right? Like this whole social thing is such a big component. And this is one of the big challenges, right? How do you know like what people are thinking in your community, right? What people value. So I definitely think this is something that every L2 should adopt and just like do their broad listening. Start with their broad listening pilot. Like broad listening is such a easy and first step to just know and know more about your community, right? Understand them. And a second crazy idea, which I don't know how much I should talk about, but I just feel like sharing, that David and I had briefly discussed, right? Like one day we imagine, each L2 has deployed this and they're using this. And then, maybe we form a parliament where it's an L1 parliament where Ethereum parliament has a representative from each L2, right? And that each L2 sort of represents what that L2 thinks or like wants to prioritize or values, right? So it's a very complex, but that would be the vision. And to be honest, like I said, any project which has a community wants to better understand their community should just like take this and deploy it. Talk to us if you want to do that. But yeah, David, do you want to add?
Everything Sejal just said, I absolutely agree. I think the dream of an Ethereum parliament that has members of all other L2 united together is amazing. So that's something we think would be quite inspirational. And also, it just generates so much data. So if you look at it, broad listening generates so much data because the values and principles are finally transparent of a community. We all feel Ethereum has so many bubbles and so many communities, but we don't know what they are, what they think if you're like just coming as a newcomer. But imagine you have these constitutions. You have Panda Bear, which is very clear. You have the open source capitalist, which is very clear. Not only can you see the values transparently, you can now finally get feedback, discuss, reflect, collaboratively learn about them. And then the other part, which I really like about the election, I'm not sure if you just saw the graph. First of all, elections are a great way for reflection. And that's why we actually said, okay, it needs to have an election. It's kind of like such a fun thing to do also. It's a celebration of democracy, the election. And election is helping us to reflect, collaborative learn, and also critically evaluate these agents and politicians, right? So it incentivizes us to think about them deeply. But at the same time, it provides a lot of data about who actually is the strongest opinion in the Ethereum ecosystem. Are we like regenerators? Are we communists? Or are we supporters of open source capitalism, right? And we don't know, except if we hold the election, right? When we hold the election, we know the data, we know the polling, we know the changes in perception over time. And so this is something that I think our space deeply needs, because Ethereum is a layer one, but all the L2s are Ethereum's cultural extensions. But who has to say? We don't know. So it's really important to get clear about this for us as a community to move forward.
Yeah. And just one thing I want to add, which was actually David's idea, which, he had mentioned, I think today, was that maybe when we do these elections and, depending upon who wins or which, politician sort of gets most votes, some of them also go and become like judges of hackathons, right? So I think that's also something I would be really interested to explore and see, coming to reality. Maybe there's a way to incentivize them. I don't know if that is, David, you are the expert, but I think those are the things that will open up as we sort of progress in the experiment. And we are like, all ready to sort of take it in all the directions we can imagine and see what needs to be done and, what is fruitful for us and for everyone. Yeah.
Another part also, just to end it with this, is we all know that on-chain governance has a problem of participatory and active delegates. Active and good delegates are heavily sought after, and that's a problem because oftentimes active delegates are ones who can afford to have the time to do so if there's no delegate problem. So they represent a specific kind of opinion group that might not represent the world, right? What about delegates from Africa? What about delegates from Southeast Asia? All these marginalized communities who cannot afford to be every day on the forum, right? Because they have to work. So having AI politicians maybe supporting in governance and forum posts and like voting helps you also to represent marginalized communities and their opinions because they can create their own kind of like AI agent. And then this one can be represented, for example, in the space. So we are in initial talks with, for example, Grassroots Economics, who's a really amazing project in East Africa on creating a potential AI agents for the Cello ecosystem. So African delegates and their perspectives can be represented and maybe even more represented and better represented than anything else, because obviously, as we all know, AI never sleeps.
Very good amalgamation of Ethereum ecosystem plus AI, I must say that. I understand that Ethereum ecosystem is built by open collaboration with open minds, and these minds gives us direction to move forward. Definitely we will come across some very good idea that will help us make this ecosystem even more matured. We all are looking forward to that. My next question is about the process that we are trying to do here and the reasoning behind that. We often talk about structured decision making. According to you, why is that critical for communities and public institutions as on date?
I think structured decision making, or I see it as data driven, evidence based decision making, is really important because we need to create or recreate trust in the institutions that we might have lost. When decisions become too intransparent, and I always joke with my Web3 friends, how can our technology aspire to be the most transparent, saying everything is put on chain, right? Every transaction is on chain. But the decisions in a DAO, the ways how decisions are made outside of the forum, but just by being in the right Telegram groups, right? How intransparent that whole process is compared to what our technology aspires to be is a huge gap. And we all know it, right? If you're suddenly voting for a proposal and like everything seems to be okay in the forum and decision seems to be clear, and then some real hidden in the dark who never engaged in anything just votes against it because someone has called him, not even called him, wrote him on Telegram asking for favors and quid pro quos. This is not the community we should aspire to be, right? This is not the role model we as Ethereum land should be. I think in many ways we need to recreate evidence-based, trustworthy decision-making that is transparent. And that's why we believe a structured approach, an approach that is reproducible, an approach that is foundationally by data and explainable by data and accountability also is very essential for us as a community to move forward, to not just make the rich richer, to not allow just the people who are in the dark to make the decisions, but to put the decision making out in the open and allow trust to flourish.
Very cool. So this all seems like very good idea, and I'm definitely looking forward to what's next. I'm wondering if there is any plan for collaboration with other public goods project in the Web3 space, and also how can the community support your mission?
Yeah, I can start and then David can add. So first, definitely support us. It's just the beginning and we need, like David said, we need I think the biggest win for us would be getting a lot of data. And so please engage with the experiment. We will drop the links. We will also share maybe Loom videos, just the walkthrough. And we have a Deep Gov group. We have Eval Science, which is, our experiment working group sort of thing in public goods funding space, which we would love for people to join in and engage in the discussion with us, talk to us directly in the group. And yeah, so that's how you can engage. And we are definitely planning to sort of continue doing this as part of GG, right? So the learnings that we will have in GG23 experiment, we want to sort of iterate on that, improve on that, and add more things in GG24. So hopefully we will continue doing that with Gitcoin. As David mentioned, Cello is another ecosystem that, we are hoping to collaborate with and bring DeepGov to Cello. And optimism is also something that we are looking at, and hopefully, where we have Lau and see other people who are also part of the group, sort of looking into that. And then, my goal would be to do it for Ethereum as much as with all the L2s. So I think that is also something we want to sort of start thinking about on how we can do broad listing and sort of make sense of what people are thinking, what is that they want to do. So like I said initially, I think every project or sort of every ecosystem needs to deploy this and needs to sort of run this in their ecosystem. So that would be the goal, to reach as many as possible and encourage them to try it out and see how that goes. But David, any things that you want to share?
No, this was amazing. Yeah. So I think we have to have more sense making in our ecosystem. And we believe the broad listening technology is, it's such an amazing technology to just learn about yourself and your community. And every chain, every app, and every dApp should really consider doing this, because your bags depend on it. So not just that, but like your culture and your community and your user bases depend on it.
Very well said. My final question for you both here today is about the experimentation success. If this experiment succeeds, what might it may unlock for the future of public good funding?
We see it as a test run for future of on-chain governance and public goods funding. We believe this is a promising way to a very exciting mechanism to design around it. So we want to be forked, we want to be edited, we want to be upgraded. This is a public good by itself, right? But we believe that this idea is, as democracy is initially for everyone, it's a great selling point. It's a place that inspires people to think outside of existing limitations. And so we hope that when this experiment succeeds, that first of all, like Sejal said, everyone's going to do this in their ecosystem, but also that it brings us all together. Because we now understand each other a bit better, right? We now see the data. We now see that we are not too different from each other. Yeah, we do are part in different opinion groups. And yeah, maybe I do not like that you launched this meme token and meme coin, but hey, in the end of all, we all care about Ethereum. We all have the similar value sets. So I hope ultimately, when this technology succeeds, we are all closer together.
And I feel like this project is kind of connecting Web 2 and Web 3 users in a way that it is bringing the concept of Web 2 in the world of Web 3. People understand what are politicians, what do they do, and why do we need them in the first place. And we are just trying to make better use case of that, having AI in addition to it.
Yeah, and that reminds me, I do want to give a shout out to Collective Intelligence Project, who's also like a big inspiration for this. Like anybody who is interested in this should go to their website, look at their roadmap and the research that they're putting out. I think their collaboration with Anthropic was, where they conducted something similar, right, David, if I remember correctly. So there's a report. Anthropic
totally.
is doing a lot of work, the way they're conducting research and sort of identifying values and how decision making can happen in this complex world. So Collective Intelligence Project, huge, huge shout out. And of course, Anthropic. And of course, Audrey, who is like probably the origin of a lot of these things. But yeah, do check it out. And, we look up to them for a lot of these things. Yeah.
Very cool. This was really a lovely conversation. I thoroughly enjoyed, and I hope people who are listening this recording will also enjoy this conversation. Any final message from this platform that you would like to share it today?
It feels cheesy and it's kind of weird to say, but please go vote. Yeah, so you should vote. Like you should always vote when you can vote because it's a privilege to express your opinion and influence the decision making. And so don't let this privilege go away. So vote at vote.deepgov.org and we are excited for which politician you support.
Yeah. And I just want to add, like, vote and support the experiment, engage with the experiment, and also do some experiments. Like, I think this is the time where, we need new ways of doing things. And I think the Ethereum community is more than open. It's in the mood to listen, and it's time to like take action and see, how we can design and define some of the things, the ways things are done. So yeah, and please, if you want to collaborate, talk to us. We're more than happy to like, support and sort of work together in maybe designing some of the experiments. So yeah.
Sweet ending note. As David said, voting is a privilege. Voting is not just a right, it's a voice, it's a choice, and it's a step towards future that we believe in. So I would also encourage people to go and vote. We are going to list all the related links in our show notes. So please follow them and go and vote. Thank you so much, David and Sejal, for sharing this fascinating project. DeepGov truly challenges us to think critically and creatively about how we govern, fund, and collaborate in the world increasingly shaped by AI. For those listening, thank you for joining us today. We have added links to the police questionnaire and the other helpful resources in YouTube description, so be sure to check them out. If you are new here, don't forget to subscribe to our channel. If you have already subscribed, make sure to hit the bell icon so you never miss an update. I hope you enjoyed this conversation, and if it has sparked your curiosity, go explore and get involved. Huge thanks to my fellow cat herders, Akash and Valeen, for their help in coordinating, editing, and bringing this episode to life. Until next time, keep building the future perfect ecosystem. This is Pooja Ranjan signing off.